Hello, hello. Welcome to Tea with a Druid. I think it's number 75. I'm JJ Middleway, and Philip kindly offered and invited me to host this particular version of Tea with a Druid. I can already see people logging in. Hi there, Marie-Helene van Noordende, John King, Marigold Topping, Heather Ramsey, Lauren Lawrence Reuter, yeah, Holland and Scotland. I am Ned Kelly, Eva Linknecht from Belgium. Friends and new and old, beautiful people, one and all. It's lovely to be linking in with you. I'm going to invite you actually to join with me in a simple connection process, which I've found very valuable over the years, very Druidic. And so I invite us to close our eyes and to take a deep breath and really sink into the body. And we're going to share three breaths, three simple breaths. The first breath with this beautiful earth beneath our feet. Deep breath. The second breath with the wonderful sky above us, magical sky. Deep breath. And the third breath with the waters that surround whatever land we are living on at this moment. Deep breath. And let's share three Arwens, meaning flowing spirit in the old language. Flowing spirit, deep breath. Just gently opening our eyes and linking in. Wonderful to imagine us all around the globe, a beautiful grove of Druids. I can see others of you are logging in, but I'm getting little bubbles going up and that comments seem to have frozen. Love and blessings to you all. I can see there's a lot of you there. So this week, let me start with a phrase that's been on my mind a lot lately, and I shared it with Philip last week, and he shared it on his blog as a consequence, but it's a Druidic saying. I will not halt in the work of love, for I know only one aim, the welfare of all beings. And that's guided me and inspires me. And indeed, it relates to this week's topic, which is, what is it? Heartfelt activism, sacred warriorship. Heartfelt activism. And I'm going to relate a couple of stories as they've impacted on me of late, recently, in that mold and in that vein. But first of all, I just want to go back to the spark for this. Came from a Druid Grove meeting. I meet regularly with my home grove in Debuni in Bristol. We've met for 25 years, some of us, and I'm very fortunate to have them as an anchor in my life. And on this particular occasion at spring equinox, my friend Ronald Hutton focalized that. We take it in turns to focus them. And he focused on March and Mars, the god Mars, and that impulse and action in the world. And he asked and invited me to talk about sacred activism, and because I had been involved in various actions in the 90s and early 2000s. And I did that, and it set some process running, as intention always does in Druidry. But my path of certainly in the last decade or so has been much more contemplative, more devotional Druidry, more chanting, song, silence, prayer. And I offered and do offer that out into the world to help sacred activism. That was and is and still remains my sacred activism. But I was invited to consider bringing my Druid skills, my Druid path into more active involvement with Extinction Rebellion recently. And somewhat surprisingly, I hadn't intended going. I was a little reticent, if I'm honest. I'm not over keen on any action that would hurt anyone or aggressive action. So I was very careful of that. But I was assured that this action would be from a place of heartfulness, and indeed it proved to be so. That it would be drug-free, alcohol-free, which helps, in my opinion, keep a clear and clean space. So I went up and found myself, as part of that action, on Waterloo Bridge for a few days, and very transformative it was too. So bringing my Druidry together there, I was one of a few people holding the space in what originally we termed the front line, but became the heart line, where we held the line, and people were being arrested, but a lot of people were singing. It was a joyous place, and we celebrated with song, prayer, silence, meditation. I sang songs like these. I am the land that is all that I am. I am the land that is all that I am. I am the land that is all around me. I am the land that is all that I am. Now, we sang that for quite a while. We haven't got time to do it like that now, but when you've got several hundred people singing that together on a bridge from heartful protest, it's very powerful, magic. Anyway, so that's going on, and that's another story in its sense. But the story I'm particularly interested in here is how ripples of heartfulness can go out into the world and have an impact beyond our reckoning, beyond our ken. So there I am, up in London. And meanwhile, someone from my hometown, it's not a large town, but someone from Stroud, another person called Ian Redmond, was making his way up on the train to London, and then he cycled across London. He didn't know those actions were taking place, and he was alerted to it initially because he cycles and the roads were traffic free. He loved it. He said, "This is wonderful." But he was going to a meeting, an important meeting, which I'll come back to. And it happened to coincide with the protests. So just a couple of weeks before, actually 3 weeks before, he's the chairman of Ape Alliance. So what is that? It's a conglomeration, an alliance of about 100 charities around the world, looking after and fighting and seeking the well-being of apes. He also works a lot with elephants, but the Ape Alliance is what it says. And they'd had a protest of their own outside the People's Bank of China in London, the headquarters. And the reason for that was because, and this is where I find it gets really fascinating, a new species of orangutan was discovered very recently. A new species, not a subspecies, new species. As Ian calls it, we have just described the latest member of our family. And it's an orangutan, what's they called? They're called a tapanuli in Batang Toru in Sumatra. And there's around 800 of them. But get this, the orangutan, the word orangutan in Indonesian, in Malay, orang means people or being, person actually, means person. And hutan means forest, people or persons of the forest. So the indigenous peoples of those areas look on orangutans and the like, and their fellow apes as fellow beings, not separate. I think that's beautiful. So there's about 800 of them left in the forested area of Sumatra in 3 groups, and there's a big river running through the forest. And there's been the intention to dam that river for 15 years, apparently, and they haven't yet done it, although they're working towards. Anyway, the People's Bank of China they were understood to be the funders of that, which is why the protest was taking place. But that day, on the day of the protest, the bank informed Ian that in fact the bank was reviewing the situation, reviewing the position, reviewing its funding. It hadn't made the decision. Would they hold off on their protests just for a while? And Ian said, okay, well, I'll talk with my fellow members of the Alliance and we'll think about it. So he did that. And a few days later, in Stroud, just down the road from me, he's got a small office under a charity shop. It's more like a broom cupboard, but it's magic happens in that room. He had a visit from 2 senior members of the Bank of China from London branch. Well, it was a deputy director and someone else, and they had a talk with him and listened. And then 3 days later, on a Sunday, the head of the Bank of China in London called him. Could he come and visit, talk things through? And he did that the very next day, Monday morning, had tea with Ian in Stroud in his house and talked it through. And they said, as a result of that, they agreed to have a meeting where they'd call in the head of the Indonesian branch of that Bank of China, and they would listen to the concerns. So meanwhile, another protest had been planned outside the Bank of China by Ian's Ape Alliance, but they redirected that somewhere else to a hotel. I think it was called the Mandarin Oriental or something like that, but it was owned by a company called Jardines Matheson. Now, Jardines Matheson happened to own the largest company in Indonesia, and they had a gold mine, or have a gold mine, quite near the forest where the Tapanuli orangutans live. Now, whilst Jardine Matheson weren't actively campaigning for the dam, they said they had enough power for their smelting and didn't need any more electricity. It was a hydroelectric scheme. They equally weren't doing anything to campaign for not building the dam, and that's what Ape Alliance was aiming and hoping for. So on this fateful day, while we're back to the protests on the bridge, I think it was April the 21st, it's just heading up to Easter this year. And he cycled over London to plush offices with Lord Sassoon, I think it was, the head of Jardines Matheson, and members of the board for a meeting. And apart from Ape Alliance, the allies from the United States were there, called Mighty Earth. I think it's rather beautiful. The Ape Alliance and Mighty Earth into battle or into action like some Marvel characters. Anyway, this was really enough, and they were suited and tie and suits job, and they had a meeting, and they were listened to. And what was interesting, the protests were going on outside, and Ian could turn to those and say, look, this is happening. People are protesting for climate justice. The world is changing. Which side of history do you want to be on? And he said, something shifted. It changed. There was a shift in the dynamic, in the energy, and a more receptive audience, undoubtedly, in his view. So then he left the meeting, he cycled across London, changed from his suit into his Ape Alliance t-shirt, and was on Waterloo Bridge. Although unfortunately, I didn't see him then. I didn't know this was going on until a few weeks after, a couple of weeks after. But better than that for me, several days later, with the protests still going on, Ian's at another meeting, again with Mighty Earth, Ape Alliance and Mighty Earth. And this meeting is with the Bank of China representatives, including the head of the Indonesian branch. And amazingly, again, well, first of all, Ian reminded the bank that it has this statement that it has the interest in the environment as a core value. So he reminded them of that, and they had the meeting, and they were more receptive because of the demonstrations going on around, and because it was front page news, and because they could see this was real. People felt strongly about justice for the earth. And in Ian's words, he said it put the wind in his sails. It enabled him to make a case. He's been banging on about this for over 40 years, 45 years, I think he's been dedicated to wildlife. And he said something shifted. Something has changed. It's put wind in his sails. I think that is quite beautiful. Nothing less than beautiful. But what it embodies and encapsulates for me is how small actions by individuals can ripple out into the world and have an unknown effect. And we're all joined, we're all on the web. And you might think when I talk about heartful action and sacred warrior, it involves this, sort of, I don't know, a statement in the world. It can be very subtle. I think acts of kindness are sacred warriorship. I think being kind. Do you know, I've got a tear in my eye as I say that, because kindness is so powerful. Simple acts of kindness is sacred warrior in action. I do believe that. I will not halt in the work of love, for I know only one aim, the welfare of all beings. So whichever way, just take a minute. As a Druid, or as someone who's interested or half interested in the Druid path, what is it calls for you, for me? What's the calling to manifest my heart gift in the world? What might I offer? So just closing, I invite you to close your eyes again. Just sinking into the earth. Let's become trees. Standing like a tree with my roots deep down, my branches wide and open. Come down the rain, come down the sun, come down the fruit to this heart that is open, because I'm standing like a tree. Standing like a tree. Standing like a tree. So with our roots deep down, we all become trees now. Let's link, rather than joining hands in sacred circle, let's join our branches and our leaves and intermingle our twigs and our branches around the globe, around this earth in a sacred grove of Druidry. We're all joined. We're all linked. Let's imagine ourselves joined. And from this sacred grove, honouring the earth with our heartful presence. I'm going to sing this song and invite you to join in. It would be lovely to think of it reverberating around this planet, around Gaia, around the earth. I am the land that is all that I am. I am the land that is all that I am. I am the land that is all around me. I am the land that is all that I am. Join in. I am the land that is all that I am. I am the land that is all that I am. I am the land that is all around me. I am the land that is all that I am. Last time. I am the land that is all that I am. I am the land that is all that I am. I am the land that is all around me. I am the land that is all that I am. So, enjoying that silence for a moment. And then just gently opening our eyes and continuing that heart link, the tree link, the being link, orangutan link, a person of the forest. We're all persons of the forest. We're all people of this earth. So enjoying our connection, enjoying our heartfulness. We celebrate we celebrate the fact that we live on this sacred earth, and we celebrate the fact we have the capacity to be sacred warriors in our own subtle, kind, and simple way. I'll be putting the story as a connection to this fuller story as a blog, and connect to the Enchanting the Void website where that story is. And I hope to put a few words up about what I've just spoken about. But irrespective of any of that, it's been an honor, a privilege, a joy to share this time with you all. Love and blessings, and go well. Be blessed.